Committee, thank you for joining us today for the Senate Education Committee meeting. Today we are having day 2 of our hearings for Board of Regents nominees. The committee has received a copy of this. It has been posted on the web, but I will simply share that the Senate Confirmation Oversight Committee met on June 28th. They also met on June 30th in a remote meeting that was a continuation from the 28th meeting on the 3 candidates that were nominated for the Board of Regents. These nominations and recommendations that did come out of those committee meetings were based on information received from the appointees on the Senate Confirmation Information Survey or Summary. Since the committee met on June 30th, additional information has been obtained, and the 3 nominees were sent back to the Senate Education Committee for review and recommendation. So that is why we are having those hearings, why they are continuing today. We will have our 3rd tomorrow, and then we will act on those 3 nominees when we meet on Thursday. So at this time, I ask Dr. Cynthia Lane, Regent, Kansas Board of Regents nominee, to come to the podium. Thank you very much. And I will simply share what occurred yesterday. You were informed by our committee chair that you would have 5 minutes to speak. She will be our timekeeper. And then after you have spoken, we will just kind of work our way around the table. Each person will have 5 minutes to ask questions and for you to respond. And like I shared yesterday, there's all kinds of ways to use up 5 minutes. We're thinking that you won't need to use up 5 minutes with just one question. So I think each member yesterday had a couple questions, so we'll just work our way through it. When there's 1 minute left, I will simply say 1 minute, and then that'll give you the minute to wrap up, or it will give the committee member the minute to wrap up. So welcome to the Senate Education Committee meeting today, and we are ready to hear your comments for us.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, Vice Chair Erickson, Ranking Member Sykes. It's just terrific to be here with the committee and with all of you today to speak to my confirmation to the Kansas Board of Regents. I want to start by letting you know that I am a lifelong Kansan. I grew up in Parsons in the southeast region of the state, and my family has a strong history in Kansas. My parents and grandparents were entrepreneurs and small business owners, cultivating businesses and retail sales, and that was always the lifeblood of our family. My education is also Kansas grown. I have a Bachelor's of Science and a Master of Science from Pittsburg State University and a doctorate in education from the University of Kansas. While serving, let me first review my professional experiences. I've had many in the realm of education, including serving as superintendent for the Kansas City, Kansas Public Schools. I've also served as assistant superintendent, a CFO, a director of special ed, a principal, a director of the Parent Professional Partnership Coalition, classroom teacher, leadership coach, and mentor. While serving as superintendent, I had the privilege of leading a dynamic team and working for a board whose innovative efforts focused on addressing the opportunity gap that far too many of our students experience. We focused on driving toward improved outcomes for students by expanding early childhood services, implementing a comprehensive literacy plan, implementing a clear instructional model that focused on clear instructional expectations, and teaching a curriculum that was aligned to college and career readiness standards. But of all those efforts, I am extremely proud of the district's implementation of Diploma Plus. Diploma Plus focused on career awareness, exploration, and participation through applied learning. The goal is to graduate students with their high school diploma, plus industry-recognized credentials, early college, internships, and other key endorsements, with business and industry leaders at the table, along with a strong partnership with Kansas City, Kansas Community College. Implementing Diploma Plus significantly increased dual and concurrent enrollment participation, as well as technical college attendance and completion of industry-recognized credentials. Frankly, most importantly, Diploma Plus set our students up for success as they transitioned into college or directly into careers. Currently, I serve as the co-chair for the Governor's Council on Education. As co-chair, I have led the council's work to strengthen alignment between business, education, and workforce systems. My work with business and industry leaders has strengthened my resolve that we must reimagine education with a focus on career preparation. This is certainly important if we want to retain our Kansas-grown talent and better position our state for high-skilled, high-growth opportunities. As a result of the council's work, and with the support of the Kansas Chamber, KSDE, community colleges, workforce boards, and business leaders, private-public partnerships are now working to provide work-based learning intermediaries in every region of Kansas. The intermediaries are charged to facilitate partnerships between business and education so that students have more access to applied learning experiences. The ultimate goal is to retain Kansas students while developing the talent needed to drive our economy. While this was extremely important, this is just one of the many ways in which the council has brought diverse groups together to talk about how we solve challenges facing our students and business. Collaborating between the council and the chamber has also resulted in the establishment of the Advantage Kansas Coordinating Council. The vision of Advantage Kansas is to drive a robust economy with the highest skilled and educated workforce. The goal is for us to be the best in the Midwest in readiness, in preparation, and in business attraction, expansion, and retention of talent. It is the combination of all of these experiences and many more that have led me here today. Since beginning my tenure with the Board of Regents, I've immersed myself in the operations and learning to advocate for the higher education system and our students. I'm committed to executing the Building a Future strategic plan, which I believe is well positioned to meet the many challenges that we collectively face. But within that plan, there are some specific priorities that will currently shape my performance as a regent. One, student success, defined as access, affordability, and completion. Two, alignment, that is future-focused and forward-leaning. And three, collaboration within the higher ed system and with business and industry. I've learned a lot since joining the board. A few of our accomplishments over the last 7 months include implementing the National Institute of Success, focusing on attainment goals, implementing a transfer policy, and ensuring that the unified appropriations prioritized affordability. And finally, we are working to actualize a process for the facility's capital renewal. I look forward to working on behalf of all Kansans to address the challenges and opportunities we face, and I'm excited to collaborate with each of you in that pursuit. Thank you very much, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you very much. We'll go ahead and start with Senator Gossage.
Thank you for being here, Dr. Lane. And I will say, yesterday I felt like I stumbled through my questions, so this time I wrote them down. And so let me ask the first. I do have three, if that's okay, Madam Chair. They're going to go pretty quick. With a continued increase in students performing below grade level in state assessments and failing ACT scores, as we've been told through the Board of Regents, how are Regent institutions positioned in your mind to identify and provide remediation learning opportunities for those incoming students, and how will they fund that remediation?
Thank you for that question. I think preparation is one of the key opportunities for strong partnerships between the KBOR institutions and K-12. So as we think about that, applied learning, in my mind, is a key to that. You might ask why. I would tell you that our students need to understand the relevance of what we're asking them to do. Once they have relevance, then they have passion and energy, and we can truly help them see that what we're asking of them leads to the vision they have for their lives, quality jobs, and that kind of thing. We need to also continue to focus on assessments that matter, that open doors. And in my tenure in KCK, we actually asked the federal government for a waiver to allow us to use the ACT as our high-stakes exam. That occurred for 2 or 3 years, around 2012 to 2015. What that did, it allowed us to highlight for our students the standards that they needed to meet in order to take that next step into post-secondary. Now, I have to tell you, we were a long way away from getting to the goals that we wanted, but we saw an increased participation in dual and concurrent because of the focus on a relevant assessment that helped move forward. The Board of Regents specifically is also advancing what we call co-requisite curriculum, meaning rather than having our students spend time in classes that are non-credit bearing, that they will be in credit-bearing classes. We will identify the gaps that they have, and we will have them learn the content as we're filling the gaps, co-requisite. So if it's a math course, for example, college mathematics, and they had struggled to hit the entry level on the assessment, we have that data, we know what's missing, we create plans to help the student move forward.
The second part of the question was, how will you fund this remediation?
It's funded through the tuition and supports the programming. It's an expectation that we don't have increased costs. But what it does do is allow students to spend their tuition money on courses that are actually credit bearing, therefore leading to more success, therefore leading to completion on time.
Thank you for that. So the next question is, it's been reported that each of the final candidates for the K-State University president's position suggested offering more Associate of Arts programs or degrees to boost enrollment. Do you support the Kansas universities taking that approach to increase enrollment? Why or why not? And how would this approach impact the role of community colleges in Kansas, would you say?
That's a great question, and one of my pillars that I mentioned to you that was most important to me is collaboration inside the higher ed system. So I first would strengthening our partnerships between the universities and the community colleges, having in-depth dialogue about where our assets are in each of those institutions, how we work together to strengthen rather than to diminish.
And then finally, Madam Chair, the Board of Regents allows out-of-state students to pay in-state rates. A lot of people have a problem with that in the state of Kansas. How does this balance out with the taxpayers of Kansas? And I looked it up, and it's $639.4 million this year out of the SGF for our universities.
I've had individuals ask me a similar question, Senator Gossage, about that tuition, and my response is, we are 44th in the nation in in-migration, and we are 39th in the nation, according to McKinsey report, in retaining our talent. So having some of these out-of-the-box strategies to encourage folks to come and be educated in Kansas is a way that we can then connect them with business, can connect them with our communities, and get them to choose to stay here. So it's a long-term investment in terms of trying to attract more people to live in this great state of Kansas.
And just to follow up, Madam Chair, do the students who are coming into the state paying in-state tuition, do we have any guarantee on this tuition? Do they pay it back if they don't stay in Kansas and do, as you said, as the long-term investment?
You know, I'd have to do some research on the specific details. Each university that has this program has a slightly different approach, but the idea is to make sure that they are invested in staying in the region, staying in Kansas, and then becoming Kansans who contribute to the economy.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam
Thank you.
Chair.
It's a nice tune, Cindy.
Senator Petty.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First of all, Cindy, it's great to see you here, and I've known Dr. Lane for a long, long time, and I've got to just say that I feel very lucky to live and represent a community that has profited from the educational leadership of Cindy Lane, and so that would be Kansas City, Kansas. So I just had to put in that plug there. Also, I wanted to mention, and I know everybody has this, but it was great to see the letter of recommendation that came to us from Alan Cobb from the Kansas Chamber, just mentioning that you're a critical thinker, which I already knew that, and that you do challenge the status quo, which actually happened so much in Kansas City, Kansas as well. You did mention the Diploma Plus initiative, and I know that started under your leadership and has continued. So you could just expand a little bit more about Diploma Plus and how that has been a initiative tool for students in Kansas City, Kansas to move on to higher education.
Yes, thank you for that question. And the work that I've had the privilege of doing with Alan has been most rewarding, and I appreciate that opportunity. So back in 2012, I mentioned to Senator Gossage that we requested to increase our standards in terms of an assessment to use the ACT. And we implemented that, realizing that our students needed an assessment that opened doors to the next step for them. Sharing that with the Student Advisory Board, I had a high school board of students that I met with each quarter. They appreciated that, but they said that they needed and wanted more. So from the conversations with students, we decided that we would pursue applied learning, meaning that we would ask kids to learn and then do something with the learning as a teaching and instructional methodology, and that we would begin to align what they were learning in class with their aspirations for the future, bringing parents in and understanding. So, for example, if a student wanted to be an engineer, then in high school, their courses would be in an academy that focused on teaching all content through the lens of being an engineer. That kind of work evolved to saying that our kids need more than a high school diploma when they graduate from high school. So we then began strengthening our partnership with Kansas City, Kansas Community College. None of this would have happened without them. To get more students engaged in dual and concurrent, and to get more students at the tech college so they could graduate with industry-recognized credentials. The last year that I was superintendent, more than 55% of the students walking across the stage not only had their high school diploma, but had industry-recognized credentials or a year of college completed and were transitioning to the next step. So I have to tell you that Diploma Plus speaks to the core of who I am, because it's about opportunity for kids, it's about relevance for kids, and highly important, it's about diverse kids seeing themselves in that next level. And it also has transformative possibilities for communities who struggle with resources. So it was not only for kids and families, but we were hoping that would be an investment in the community at large. I do have to say that the Diploma Plus is continuing, not only in KCK, but across the entire metropolitan region. Kauffman Foundation has adopted it as a model. They've rebranded it Real World Learning. They talk about kids graduating with market value assets, but that program came from conversations with high school kids right in KCK.
Just so wonderful. And this is a kind of personal anecdote, but just this, well, last Tuesday when we went home from here, I was at Aldi's and I'm standing in line to check out. And I'm wearing a mask that says Kansas, that has KCKCC, and this kid says, "Do you teach there?" And I said, "Well, no." I said, "I'm
1 minute.
I'm using up time. I'm a senator," but he was a Kansas student. He's going to the tech center. I was so proud of that, but he was, and proud of where he's going on next. So it's just an example. You have had so many recognitions. I was wondering if you could expand on one that stands out most to you.
I've been really blessed with people saying thank you for hard work for my team. It was always about my team, my board, my community. But I have to tell you that those recognitions don't mean as much as seeing one of my former students at the service station the other day. I was getting my oil changed, and he came running up to me. This is a 40-year-old man now, wanting to tell me about the success he's had in his life, a kid that started out in an alternative school, or the times where families would want to share the success of their kids, or being invited to graduation parties, and all those kinds of things. So while the recognitions are lovely, it's that personal connection that means the most. If you push me to select one, the Henry R. Block School at UMKC recognized my team with a Community Service Award for Impact Wednesday. Several years ago, KCK had more than 1,500 homeless students a year, and we brought together the community to say, what can we do to help these families with resources? So they instituted a program called Impact Wednesday, where every Wednesday, all the resource providers in the community would come to one place, and we would bring families in so they could get all the supports they needed. Within 2 years, we cut that homeless rate in half, and that program is continuing to have great impact.
Senator Salentrop.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks for being here today, Ms. Lane, and thanks for your interest in becoming a Kansas Regent.
Thank you.
I have 3 questions. This third one is a 2-part question.
Okay.
We're looking for your answers simply to document our hearing. So question number 1, have you ever played a role or held a position in a political campaign? If so, please identify the candidates, the dates of the campaign, and describe your involvement. And the reason we're asking that is if there's any undue influence by any senators that are going to deal with your nomination.
Understood. No, I've never played a role in anyone's campaign.
Okay, thank you for that. Are you or your spouse or any of the close family member related to any state government official or employee? And if so, provide details.
No, I'm not married, and I'm not related to any other employee.
Third and last question, 2-part. And again, just standard questions. Is your spouse or other close family member currently or ever been a party of interest in any administrative agency proceedings or civil litigation that is related in any way to the position for which you are seeking appointment?
No, no, sir.
Part. Has any business in which you, your spouse, close family member, or business associate are or were an officer, director, or partner been any party to any administrative agency proceedings or civil litigation relevant to the position to which you are seeking appointment? And if so, please provide the details.
No. Specifically, I think your question is specific to the KBOR position. The answer would be no. I do want to say, Senator Suellentrop, that there was a question on this survey that after hearing the questions to Mr. Ice, I went back and looked at question number 33, and I'd welcome an opportunity with your permission to talk about that question, if I may. So question 33 talks about, have you had a business in which you were or an officer, director, or partner been a plaintiff in or defendant in a civil lawsuit? I've thought of that from the perspective of me personally. Have I been a plaintiff or have I been a defendant? And the answer is no, and that's what I put on here. But I want to be very transparent because most of the individuals in this building and a lot of people across our state know that I was involved in the Gannon case. I did not see that applicable to my answer here, but I wanted to just put that out, recognizing that I was involved in that. And I'm very grateful that this committee had leadership, Senator Baumgardner recognizing your key role in resolving that so we could move forward and talk about the outcomes we want for our kids.
Okay, I might look forward to discussing it outside the committee.
I would appreciate that.
Your answers.
Yes.
Senator Erickson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Dr. Lane, for being here. I, too, get the most satisfaction in running into a former student, and we don't always see that immediate impact, but it's always very rewarding and fulfilling when we do years down the road. So, you mentioned outcomes for students in your response to Senator Suellentrop. So I just have a couple of quick questions about that. This is an article that was written by Tess Koppelman, and it is from June 5th, 2012. And it states that the state of Kansas and 54 public school districts are in court battling over school funding. The superintendent for Kansas City, Kansas schools, Dr. Cynthia Lane, testified Monday and Tuesday in court and argued that the lack of funding is impacting her kids. She says the result is her kids aren't prepared for college. Only 34% of kids who graduate from KCK High School go on to college. And then only 1 in 4 of those kids will actually be able to keep up and return for their second year in college. Lane argues that it's not the kids' fault, it's the fact that schools don't have what they need to help kids succeed. So it's been 10 years, almost 10 years since that article came out. So my first question would be, is that an accurate recollection of your comments during that time?
You're taking me back, but I believe it would be an accurate reflection. Mm-hmm.
Okay, very good. My next question is, when you said it's not the kid's fault, they don't have what they need to succeed. What were you referring to?
In my opening statement, I talked about or mentioned the board focused on opportunity gaps. Many of the children in my community don't have the kinds of networks around them outside of a school that help them understand pathways forward, things that they need. So we had to be extremely intentional in crafting opportunities for our kids to develop awareness of their strengths, explore possibilities, and we did that with our business partners in our community college, and preparation activities. I mentioned having the high schools aligned to career academies focused on the industries that drive our state forward, like architecture, engineering, and construction, healthcare, frankly, many of the things that are in the Kansas Promise. So actually crafting intentional experiences that allowed them to understand how content translated into how they see themselves in the future, why college is an important step in that direction. We lacked resources to provide the additional supports needed to successfully implement all of that for every student. We worked hard to ensure 90% of the kids in the community are free and reduced lunch, that we provided intensive work in the general ed classroom because we knew a pull-out kind of remediation would not be successful. So we were striving to provide access and opportunity in that way, and that's why that lawsuit was important to the community.
I appreciate that, and I think everyone here is aware of the outcome of that lawsuit. So based on that outcome, would you still say that school districts are lacking the resources to help their students succeed?
You know, I've been retired for 4 years, so my perspective on that is not fully informed, but I would thank you and this body for ensuring that we met the standards outlined in that case of adequacy and equity, mostly important, equity, and that you now have a cost of living accelerator in there to try to keep pace. I think that was frankly brilliant on this body's behalf to be able to put that in place so we don't go back to where we were.
1 minute.
In 1 minute, so very quickly, I want to get down to the nuts and bolts. So my question is, you've mentioned student outcomes several times. You mentioned the innovative effort to improve outcomes for students. In your former district of Kansas City, Kansas, what has been the impact on outcomes for students due to those increased resources?
You know, I can't speak to where they are today. Like I said, I've been retired for 4 years. I know that we were disappointed in the progress when I was still leading that team. We were moving forward, but not at the rate we needed to on the standardized assessments, but we were certainly accelerating in seeing our kids be successful, getting admitted into college, having opportunities at the tech college, and being successful completing those requirements for industry-recognized credentials and degrees.
Would it surprise you to know that on any of the objective measures, performance has decreased? Would that be surprising to you?
No, I know the data from when I was superintendent, and I also want to remind us that the assessment changed from one that we were doing quite well on, more than 70% of our kids meeting and exceeding expectations, to one that was more rigorous. So we continued to work on that more rigorous standard. But let me just say that how that informs this work and my passion around student access and opportunity and success is that we have to be extremely intentional to not only get students in the door of higher ed, but help them be successful while they're there and complete on time so that they can then move forward with their lives. So I think that experience, sometimes experiences that are disappointing in the result, make a stronger strategy moving forward on how you can be successful.
I know my time has expired. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for your answer.
Thank you.
Senator Straub.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you, Dr. Lane, for being here today. I noticed that you attended Pittsburg State University, and probably an unknown fact amongst this committee is that I was a Kansas Regent's Honors Academy attendee between my junior and senior years of high school. And so I can relate to having gone to taken a college class at Pittsburg State University. And that summer, while I was in that academy, we studied a book called The End of History and the Last Man by Francis Fukuyama. And it was basically a study of Marxism, socialism, communism, and our form of government, our democratic republic. How do you feel about the theories that are being taught in our universities today?
That's a broad question. How do I feel about them? Could you say more about what you're looking for?
Yeah, how do you feel about Marxism, communism, and socialism theory courses being taught in our universities? Basically, any type of political science theory courses, and what are those courses promoting amongst, you know, our young adults?
You know, I think, Senator Straub, the way I would respond to that is the importance of our universities and institutions of higher ed of being places where divergent thinking can occur, that we engage in rigorous, in-depth dialogue, and that we try to understand issues. I don't have any specific knowledge about how those particular events are spoken to. I would look for, as a regent, that they are fact-based, that they're inquiry-based, but they are not promoting any one view over another.
Okay, thank you. And my second question is, I've had complaints from a number of constituents who attend a community college in my district, and they were being offered extra credit, academic extra credit, for showing proof of vaccination status. How do you feel about that?
I've never been a fan for extra credit on anything that it does not tie directly into the course outcomes and what we're trying to achieve.
Thank you for that answer. And then one final question, if I may, Madam Chair. I also have another constituent who had a daughter who was attending, I believe it was Fort Hays State University, in a nursing program, and had dropped out of the program because of the pressure to get vaccinated. How do you see our decline in enrollment in our universities, and do you think it's tied to any of the vaccine or mask policies being instituted there?
First, let me say I hope that student goes to the university and talks about her experience, and that there's some accommodation that could be made. There are some requirements that we have to deal with as adults that are not in our control, and then we have choices to make. Grandma always said, make a choice and then be responsible for the outcome. So it could be in that particular field that there is a clinical requirement that would lead the student to being shared that information, but it's incumbent on us to make students aware early on in their program what requirements are so they can make informed choices.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I also thank you, Dr. Lane. I think it is key that we notify students of the requirements and the policies that will be applied throughout the entire course of their program of study. Thank you.
In as much as is possible, certainly. You ask about that impact on enrollment. I think our experience through COVID has impacted everything, and certainly enrollment is one of our key challenges that we need to address. I believe we address that by helping families see the relevance and the investment, and then ensuring that our students have the resources they need economically to compete.
Senator O'Shea.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My questions are similar to yesterday, so if you watched, you'll know what they are. But Gallup shows a stat that 83% of students say that they go to college to get a job. And so I think very much educators, their role is to help students get a job. However, the way that we reward educators is by getting more degrees. We promote them if they get more degrees. And to me, that sometimes lacks that. A lot of our educators haven't had the real world experience in the job sector. Not that their world isn't real. And I mentioned that I had my best professor was getting a PhD simply because it was the only way to get a pay raise. And so how do we address that, and how do we pay by performance for our education system?
That's a great question. Let me start by commenting to your comment that educators lack business experience, and they certainly do. I think strategically we can work on that by close partnerships with industry so that the industry can work with teachers to create curriculum that's actually reflective of what happens in the real world and those kinds of things. So, and externships, critically important. We do have performance opportunities within the Board of Regents. The universities could speak to you that in much greater detail. What I've learned in the last 7 months from visiting all the campuses, that they will all tell you that it's been difficult in the time of declining investment in higher ed to keep pace with actually being able to award those performances. I think this is a yes and for increasing your degrees, because it is in depth of knowledge and expertise, and awarding for performance is something that we should work on together to make sure happens.
Thank you. Your responses reminded me that my 95-year-old grandpa loves getting the Manhattan Mercury and seeing everyone's salaries and for who work at Kansas State University. So thank you. I had mentioned Washburn University is in my district, and I love the partnership that they've struck with Washburn Tech and just the way that they've promoted that and the way that they've worked together. And I think it's a great model that we could use around the rest of the state. How do you see encouraging those partnerships elsewhere?
I concur with you. One of the things, my third priority is that collaboration piece. We have a lot of potential and opportunity to strengthen our collaboration by having our 2-year institutions work more closely with 4 years. Thinking about what are the assets, what are the leading programs that each institution has, and how do we support each other so that those work in concert rather than in competition. I was hoping you'd talk to me about leadership, but maybe we'll do that later.
Senator Dietrich.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Cindy, for being here today. Great to see you again. So let's talk a little bit about higher education. And I asked this question yesterday. What do you think the greatest challenge is for higher education now in the state of Kansas?
I heard my colleague talk about it in terms of enrollment. I will drill down a little bit more specifically. It is student success in terms of access, in terms of affordability, and completion, on-time completion. So that's one bundle, one big challenge. The second one is helping folks understand that the investment in higher ed is worth it to their personal economies and to our economy as a state. There's a lot of conversation, you all have heard it, news reports that say higher ed is too expensive, it's not worth it. I think we need to reverse that conversation, because if we look at the long-term income prospects of someone who only has a high school diploma, that clearly the investment is worth it. But where we need to improve is helping all of our students and families see a place in higher education, whether that be 2-year technical or 4-year, making sure that it's affordable, that we're balancing tuition with state support, with other resources, and then most importantly, that we are shepherding those students all along the way so they complete on time. Our on-time completion rate, and this data is probably a couple of years old, is just over 50%. We need to address that. So for me, that is the most urgent.
And to ask you to choose between affordability and degree completion.
I think they go hand in hand, because if you're not on track to complete, then you're getting out of whack with affordability. So,
thank you. Second question, if I may. So what is there about the mission of the Kansas Board of Regents that is most powerful for you personally?
I knew you'd go to a personal thing. I'm going to talk to you about Rachel Squared, 2 kids, both named Rachel. One was on that leadership team that helped design the initial Diploma Plus. Great family support, people who are well-intended, doing everything they could for their children, but highly under-resourced. So because of Diploma Plus, she was able to graduate from high school on one day, and the very next day graduated from the community college with an associate's degree. She then went on to K-State and did quite well. It's changed the trajectory of her entire family. Rachel, number 2. I met Rachel, she's walking down the street, a very hot day, and she had a little boy in tow, and so I don't do this often, but that day I pulled over to say, hey, do you need some help? It happened to be the first day of school. She got in the car and she told me her story, and just briefly, lacked secure housing, family involved in substance abuse. The little boy with her was her 4-year-old nephew, and she had just dropped off her second grade niece to school. And she said to me, I face a lot of challenges, but I know that education is the gateway to change my life. So Rachel, number 2, graduated second in her class, went on to be a med tech, and I think is transitioning to be an early child educator because she wants to transform lives. So that's why the work of higher ed is so important to me, because it truly is transformative, and it's so important to a thriving state, which I love.
Thank you. Senator Sykes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Dr. Lane, for being here. I had the privilege to be in your first confirmation oversight. So my first question to you, and I asked this yesterday, why did you want to be a regent? And now, after doing the job for 7 months, why do you still want to be a regent?
I didn't know I wanted to be a regent. A door was opened, a suggestion was made, and I have been looking for what's the next pursuit in life, because I feel like life is mission-driven. And service to kids and families has always been at the center. So it seemed to be a great opportunity for that and for learning. I've learned a tremendous amount in the last 7 months. It's frankly been like a tsunami of information. But what stands out the most is the absolutely amazing work happening in campuses across the state, everywhere. Unique programs, things that are driving the economy, opportunities for us to strengthen that even more, the opportunities of that close relationship with community colleges and tech colleges, because they are the engines of workforce development. All of that seems to be an extension of the work that I am so passionate about, which is through education, creating opportunity for families.
Thank you for that. My next question, you talked a little bit about the Advantage Kansas Coordinating Council. Would you like to elaborate a little bit more about how that's jumpstarting talent and, trying to work with our need for a workforce in our state?
Let me give you an example of how that's happening in Southwest Kansas. There's a group there of business leaders and educators who came together to try to figure out how to retain talent in Southwest Kansas. They call themselves the Southwest Kansas Entrepreneurship. And the kinds of things that I had the privilege of hearing them talk about was how to connect young people with the opportunities in their region. And so they are putting together magnificent support services for students to jumpstart them into opportunities in the region, to let them see the power of what's available there, the opportunity that they have. So that's the reason that Advantage Kansas Coordinating Council was formed after hours of conversation with education and business leaders, including really Alan Cobb giving a lot of time to that, to think about how do we align the system so that we all are moving towards a shared vision. So the vision of Advantage Kansas is to drive a robust economy with the highest skilled and educated workforce. And the goal, to know that we're there, is that we are the best in the Midwest and beyond in that preparation and awareness and exploration, and in business attraction, expansion, and most importantly, retention of talent. So Advantage Kansas has 3 signature initiatives. One is Jumpstart, which is all about work-based learning. It's about early college. It's about advancing Excel and CTE to more students so that they graduate high school with those credentials. And then Talent Ready is focused on adult learners who may need to be retooled, who could be connected to apprenticeships, who we need to have thinking about high demand jobs in areas like information technology, cybersecurity, and that kind of thing. And then the Opportunity Kansas portion of that, the subcommittee, is focused on the commerce piece of that. What is the talent needs of business that are currently in Kansas, and what are the talent needs of those that we're trying to attract to the state, and then how do we emphasize programs that develop that? And you won't be surprised, that's all in information tech, cyber, data analytics, that kind of thing. So that's the work Advantage Kansas is trying to do.
Thank you. And my final question, I have always admired your collaboration and wanting to learn from all situations. So my question is, since you've been serving as a regent for the last 7 months, what is the impact that you have seen with the Promise Scholarship and collaboration between the regents and the community colleges?
You know, the real experts in the room on the impact are behind me and in front of me. I understand in the first year, more than 600 individuals took advantage of that. It's tremendous, because one of the biggest barriers that most people have in thinking about post-secondary are the resources. So this is an extremely important to the first pillar of the Build a Future plan, which is about Kansas families. It's about affordability. It's also critically important to Pillar 2, because it's about retaining folks for businesses, the talent that we develop. So I thank you for advancing that. I also thank you for supporting additional needs-based aid as we try to expand opportunities across the state.
Thank you, Senators. Dr. Lane, when you became superintendent in 2010, you indicated to the media that one of the first decisions to cross your desk was whether or not to join the lawsuit, whether or not to recommend for the KCK School District to become a lead plaintiff. And so I have to say that, quite frankly, my first impressions and my observations of you as a superintendent have had lasting impressions. And that very first observation was your action to join that lawsuit. But when I first actually met you, it was in this physical room. And in fact, I was sitting right where Senator Suellentrop was sitting. And we had a hearing. It was a packed room, standing room only, and it was a hearing about restraint and seclusion. And a part of the impassioned testimony that we received was from a mother from your school district, where she talked about how she went to pick up her child early for an appointment and found her nonverbal child, who also had other disabilities, in a cage. And it was a cage made up of 2x4s and chicken wire, is the way she described it. And I was struck because it sounded very much like the cages that my brother built for his champion 4-H rabbits. This happened in one of your schools. And at the time, the chair of Senate Education was Dr. Abrams, and he did allow KCK to respond. You did not come to the podium. Rather, you sent your spokesperson up, who quietly stated, that's no longer a practice at KCK. Now, you are here and you are at the podium. So I would like to know, at that time, you did not take a stand for the child. You did not take a stand for the mother. You did not even take a stand personally for the institution, that ownership that we expect of leaders. So what I would like to know is, as a regent, what issues will you take a stand for or against? And I'll give you a couple examples. Will you take a stand against that growing number of high school graduates that we have that are academically unprepared? Can we count on you to take a stand with the co-ed rapes and attacks that are occurring here in our Kansas universities? What about, will you take a stand for our universities to adopt a reading curriculum? And as of today, we still do not have a single university in our state that has adopted the reading curriculum that the Dyslexic Task Force adopted 4 years ago. That has not been implemented. And when I think of that child with a disability who was in a cage, I think of the children in our schools. And we have universities that continue to educate our teachers that have not been trained to address that reading disability that we know so many kids have. So what would you say are the things that you will take a stand on? Let's start with that.
Senator Baumgardner, I appreciate your passion. I respect your recall I don't believe I was in the room the day that that hearing occurred, but I can tell you where I was. I was in the school where this was allegedly happening, examining their practices, working with the special ed team to make sure that parents would never, ever have to experience what that parent did. So let me just say that
It was the first time that I physically saw you.
I won't argue with the recall. I will concur that that kind of practice is deplorable and that we should take stances against treating any human being in a way that we would want our own children cared for. What I'll take a stand for is students, diverse students, having opportunities and access, diverse students of being allowed to have our voices heard. I'll take a stand on making sure that families get the support they need to see themselves as viable Kansans who have a place here. There are a lot of things that I would take a stand on, but I can assure you that I have stood in the line of fire for a lot of things that are important to kids and families, and I'll continue to do that.
Well, you've actually made reference to me today about the stand I took on school funding, and let's be clear about that. While this legislature was still under attack with the lawsuit, it wasn't the $360,000 or $360 million that I negotiated that got passed into and approved by our state Supreme Court. The plaintiffs were in fact arguing for $900 million. $900 million. I cannot imagine how devastating that would be to this state today if in fact the plaintiffs had been successful with the Supreme Court. And when I look at numbers such as our SGF, so our SGF in 2013 was for K through 12, was 50% of the SGF was going to K through 12. 9.3% was going to our Regent's institutions. So what's happened since that finally got settled is we now are looking at the SGF for K through 12 is 53%, and the SGF funding for our universities has dropped down to just over 9%. So as that pie, that slice of the pie continues to increase for K through 12, what it has done is it has squeezed the slice much smaller for our Regents universities. And I have to tell you that when we combine that with the loss of almost 19,000 students attending higher education in the course of the last 10 years, that puts us in a situation that is very concerning. We are one of the highest taxing states in the United States so that we can pay that K through 12 bill and try and pay to other agencies. But what we know right now is we have a rising university debt. I know the Regents institutions, because they did get more funding from the state legislature, that they've been trying to hold the line as far as tuition. But my concern is Kansas student borrowers, and this is up to date for this last year, the average is $32,045 for student debt loan. Tell me, how can our graduates, and actually it's much higher for Johnson County students, it's $37,000. But how can new graduates even afford to live in Kansas?
You bring up many issues that I think are central to the need for regions and legislators to all be working together to find common solutions, the kinds of things that we're trying to do through Advantage Kansas, but that effort will not be successful without all of us coming together around the goals, the things that we're trying to achieve. It is imperative that we look at affordability, not only tuition, but also fees and what we're charging students for fees. And so I'm privileged to be on the Fiscal Affairs Committee led by Regent Hutton, and examination of fees is part of what we're doing to try to make sure that we're holding that cost down, and then ensuring that students complete on time. Increasing that four-year completion rate is critically important. But let me just say that my comment about your involvement in Gannon was one of gratitude, that you were willing to continue to be in the arena along with your colleagues so we could move past that. had a lot of time to reflect over the last 4 years. And one of the things that strikes me most is that conflict, which, by the way, my board decided we would engage in, and I then did the job. But that conflict
I
was,
understand how boards work.
I know.
It's typically a recommendation
yes,
from the person that's the top administrator, which would be
I
you.
won't suggest to you that I didn't recommend it, but the ultimate decision was not mine. But I knew the importance of that to my kids. But let me just say this. Part of my reflection is just mine, you may not agree, is that the reason that we were in that position in the first place is because we went to our corners and we didn't communicate with each other, we talked at each other. So you have a firm commitment from me in this work to commit to communication, to problem solving, to find some way forward that we can all feel good about to do what's right for Kansas and Kansas kids.
I know that you continue to speak about collaboration. I hope that you can appreciate that when there is a history where there was not collaboration, where it took us, I was on the phone with Dale Dennis to every one of the superintendents saying, why don't you settle? 360 million is the most you're going to get as far as a settlement. There's no way the state can afford 900 million. None of them were willing to collaborate. And I would say in most of that 10 years, there was no collaboration. In fact, rather, the legislature was portrayed as the enemy. The reason we have a problem in K through 12 education, the reason children aren't succeeding, the reason teachers can't get raises, it's the problem of the enemy of the legislature. I do want to pivot to Pittsburg State University. It's in the midst of a search for a new president. You know, what we have learned is that during the time of the president that's retiring, there's been a significant reduction of tenured faculty. Significant. I think it's nearly or just over 50 faculty members that were tenured, and those tenured positions have evaporated. So explain how limited tenured positions have a negative impact on the vitality of any university, but specifically Pittsburg State.
I can't explain Pittsburg State's stance on that because I am learning that from you today. So let me just say,
Impact of not having tenured staff at a university.
not having tenured staff and talented staff is a significant impact on our ability to ensure that we're preparing our students for the careers of the future. So I would concur that that's an area that we would need the incoming president to focus on.
My last question just has to do with, we know that we have fewer students in our K through 12 schools. We know we have fewer students in our universities and community colleges. During that time frame that Gannon got started, there was a 43% increase in administrators and non-teaching staff in Kansas, even though the number of students increased by just 5% during that same time frame. So we had 43 on one area and 5% on the other. And there was a study, I believe it was done by our legislative post-audit, that estimates that the state could have saved over $340 million during that time frame if their hiring had been based solely on keeping the same rate as what the increase was on students. So I'm wondering, with declining enrollments in higher education, what are the regents looking at with regard to its administrative or non-teaching staff challenges or reductions?
Each of the universities is charged to take a look at that, Senator Baumgardner, and to make sure that their organization is agile, but yet can perform what we expect them to perform. So I can just say to you that those are ongoing conversations that the board has with each of the CEOs. They bring us solutions, we talk through options, and we move that forward. Enrollment decline is a significant concern. Keeping the talent base that we have in institutions of higher ed is a significant concern. So let me just close my comment back to you by saying I look forward to working with this body and with my fellow regents as we try to find solutions to move our state forward.
Thank you very much for your participation today.
Thank you.
Dr. Lane. As I told the attendees yesterday, The committee will address recommendations on Thursday. We will have our third hearing tomorrow. Thank you, committee. Our meeting is adjourned.